Hey, greetings, my friends. Mary Rose here, and it's Wednesday. I see a few of you are watching live. That's so great. I'm going to turn on the comments in just a second, but first, just a reminder. If you happen to be watching on Facebook, you can click the little Facebook thing. It says streamyard.com/Facebook, and that will let me know who you are since I'm sitting here streaming into YouTube and Facebook at the same time. It is just so magical. Hey, Chris, hi, I see you here. Cynthia, it's great to see you here. I see a few of more of you here. Terry, it's nice to see you. I wasn't sure, whether saying that we were going to talk about a quote from Winston Churchill today was going to attract, new viewers to the live stream, or maybe let some of you just sit home and watch a Ken Burns documentary and call it a day. But I promise what we're really going to talk about today is the second act. We're going to talk about the second act mission that your hero, your protagonist, your main character must be on. And those of you who are in the midst of writing drafts know that this is it's a dangerous passage indeed, isn't it? The second act. It's the most of our book. It's more than half of story structure. It's the long middle. And it is the place where things can and do sometimes go terribly, terribly wrong. So we're going to fix that today. I think it may be of use to any of you out there who are trying to figure out what my hero is supposed to be doing on all of those pages in the middle. For those of you who are new to these live streams, who am I? I'm Mary Rose Wood. I'm an author, and I'm best known for my middle grade books, The Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place, a 6-book series, and also my recent book, Alice's Farm, A Rabbit's Tale. So I'm a working writer, and everything I teach to my students in the Path of the Storyteller program is it's kind of the hard-won wisdom, if you will, of my own circuitous journey to being able to, tell a story and build a life as a storyteller, as a writer. And I know that that is the dream for so many of you. And I encourage you to stick with your dream. If it's difficult, if it feels like a lot of things are not self-evident, welcome to the world of mastery. Writing fiction is a complicated endeavor. You're brave to undertake it. It is very important work, but it's not just going to explain itself. It's not a simple thing. It's not like my recent first attempt at trying to learn to play pickleball. You can pick up pickleball in half an hour, but you can't pick up writing good fiction. So give yourself some grace. I'm glad you're here. We're going to keep every week talking about the various things that might not be self-evident to you. And I really hope these live streams are, elevating the way you're thinking about story structure. So, the mission of the second act sounds so heavy, your mission, if you choose to accept it. But the truth is, our hero needs something to do. Our story is it's not an aimless conversation over a cup of tea between friends in the afternoon. I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't write a story that took place during a conversation between friends on an afternoon. But in order for it to feel like a story, that conversation is going to be life-changing, right? It's going to be a life-changing conversation. So though the adventure may be wielded, in dialogue, something's got to happen. And so that thing that has got to happen in the second act is what I call the mission. So before we get too far into this idea of a second act mission, I'm just going to do a super quick review of what I mean by the second act, just in case 3-act structure is not, a very familiar term to someone who's watching this. Story structure has 3 acts: the beginning, the middle, the end. That's not too hard to remember, right? The beginning is where we meet our hero, and that hero is in some kind of condition that is not sustainable. It has a quality of being a house of cards that's about to topple. And what's the crack in the foundation of that situation may or may not be evident to the hero, but it's got to be evident to the reader. I hope I've made that point many times to my Path of the Storyteller students and to those of you who've been watching these videos. Please put the story out there where the reader can see it. So into this unsustainable situation in the first act, some new event is going to happen, and it's going to be what sort of topples this house of cards. And this is what lets us know that a story is about to begin. The stasis, the instability that had been running all along is no longer available. Something's got to happen. It's like a vacuum, and we know what nature feels about a vacuum. Well, we know what I feel about a vacuum. It's a very handy appliance to have. So into this vacuum rushes what? An invitation to some sort of adventure. This is going to bring us to Winston Churchill in a minute, I promise. But this invitation to some sort of adventure comes in so that the hero now has the opportunity to spring into action, to say yes or no, to do something, right? The hero is not going to sit there for the whole story thinking about what to do. The hero actually is going to commit to do something. And the thing that they commit to do, guess what? That's the mission. And as soon as they commit to do this thing or are swept into the necessity of doing this thing, we have crossed from the first act into the second act. And so the second act, as I said a moment ago, is most of the book. It's probably more than 50% of the total length of your storytelling. What is going on in that second act? The mission. All right. Now there's a third act too that involves the ending. It's going to involve dealing with the consequences of that mission. But today we're going to talk about the mission. So this is a good moment to bring on my special guest star, the former Prime Minister, no longer with us, Winston Churchill. All right. Here's the quote, and I should now be sort of small on the side of the screen so you can see me sitting next to Winston Churchill. The things I never thought I would experience, but here I am. I'm going to read this quote to you, and then I want to break it down a little bit because you'll see that it intersects a great deal with what we talk about when we talk about story structure. So here's the quote. To each there comes in their lifetime a special moment when they are figuratively tapped on the shoulder and offered the chance to do a very special thing, unique to them and fitted to their talents. What a tragedy if that moment finds them unprepared or unqualified for that which could have been their finest hour. Now, this quote, like so many famous quotes from Winston Churchill, you know, it was a wartime quote. It was a wartime speech. And so he's not talking about storytelling, is he? He's not talking about how to write good fiction, how to write a novel. He was a terrific writer, as is well known from his many, many quotable speeches and inspiring words. But that's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about what the plight of England during World War II, when this island country was in the crosshairs of Germany, and it fell to them to defend, feeling, I think, somewhat overmatched, right? To defend what they considered the free world against a force of darkness, right? An encroaching power. And so the stakes were very high, right? When he talked in this inspiring way to try to create an understanding in his listeners that we are obligated, in a sense, to rise to the occasion when the occasion is presented to us. So that's the context. But we as storytellers, I think, already can recognize a lot of what he's saying here as being component parts of good story structure. And what I want to flag for you, kind of as an introductory frame for this talk, is that when we talk about story structure and we talk about the toppling of unstable worlds and the invitation to adventure and the hero accepts the call and all this, all these sort of slogans that we use to talk about how the energy of story moves forward, how it works. It's not a gimmick. It's not some random thing, right? That some writing teacher invented on a slow day. It's not something that Hollywood invented. It is, as you can see in this quote, it is a very deep understanding of one of the most meaningful qualities of being human, which is that we have the capacity to rise to the occasion when called for. Character is revealed under pressure. And in this quote, Churchill is describing the moment when the pressure arrives in a person's life, how they might react. Okay. I'll take this down for now because I think you've had a chance to absorb it. We can bring it back if you want it again. So he's not giving advice about story structure, but he is reminding us that the shape of story structure that we writers rely upon, that we study and master and try to use to help shape the narratives we want to write into engaging, impactful stories for our reader, is based on human experience. It's based on a kind of a psychological accuracy. It's a symbolic way. Yes, storytelling obviously we're in the realm of symbols, right? We're not necessarily writing documentary, history. We're inventing stories, we novelists, we fiction writers, but we're working with the kinds of energies that are psychologically accurate, that are recognizable in people's real lives. So just take that, as just a reminder that these types of story energies are based in something, and that's why they're so effective. It's why I talk about them so much. All right. So when we have a great story, it's a way for the human reader to sort of meditate on what it means to be human. But let's go back to Churchill, because he was meditating on what it means to be human, not in the guise of writing fiction, but in a role of leadership and trying to inspire others by drawing these kinds of archetypal energies to the fore. So let's look at them. I'll bring this back for a second. To each there comes in their lifetime a special moment. We'll stop right there for a second. A special moment. Now, you heard me talk a little bit about the first act, that there's a condition, right, that's ongoing. But it's not the final condition. It's a kind of a unsustainable condition. Something's bound to happen. And Churchill in this quote says, to each in their lifetime comes a special moment. So that's just a reminder for us storytellers that stories begin at the special moment. They might begin a breath before the special moment, the day of the special moment, right? They might begin adjacent to that special moment, or they might begin as that moment is manifesting. But stories don't begin the month before, the year before, right? The special moment. There's a piece of writing advice you may have heard, which is that we start our stories as late as possible. But all that means is that we don't need a long on-ramp. We're looking for the special moment that comes a knocking to each in their lifetime. And that's where our story is going to begin. Now, this next phrase is so great. He writes, when they are figuratively tapped on the shoulder, right? Something happens. Something new enters the hero's experience once the special moment has come. And this in story structure is often referred to as the call to adventure. And many of the stories that we talk about a lot on this channel, it's very clear what the call to adventure is. In a book like The Hobbit, Gandalf literally comes and knocks on the door. So a figurative tap on the shoulder in life, in fiction, can be a literal knock on the door. A literal letter from Hogwarts, right, arrives in the mail. They are tapped on the shoulder and offered the chance to do a very special thing. So once this chance is offered, right, the hero's condition is changed, because now there's a new piece of information in the story. But here's where words can be tricky. And I just want to take a moment to look at what Churchill's here is called the chance to do a very special thing, which is just such a kind of a humble phrase, right? We're offered the chance at this very special moment that comes in our lives. We're offered the chance to do a very special thing. In story structure, when that's called a call to adventure, we have to look at the word call and we have to look at the word adventure, and we have to see what is that suggesting to us, because those words are not perfect. When somebody comes and calls, or when there's a call to do something, it's basically do it. It's just to do it. Come on, let's do it. I'm calling, come over. What are we going to do? I don't know. I'm just calling, come over, let's do something, right? That's a call. But if I say it's not so much a call to adventure as an invitation, I just want you to ponder for a moment the difference between a call and an invitation. If I call you up and say, hey, come over, and you say, what are we going to do? I say, I don't know, just come over. But if I call you up and say I have an invitation, you'll say, to what? And I'll say, well, it's a birthday party. When is it? It's Saturday. What time? It's 3 p.m. What am I wearing? It's formal. Come in, come in your fancy dress. No gifts, right? So an invitation has a lot of details on it. It has a what are we doing? When are we doing it? How are we doing it? And so I have broken myself as much as I can over the years of the habit of saying the call to adventure, because it isn't a call. It's an invitation. It's not a thing. As Winston says, it's a very special thing. It's special, it's specific. It's special in another way as well, but I want to just make sure, I want to give a little space around this point, that an invitation to adventure has the kind of specificity about it that lets the hero know when to show up, what they're expected to do, what they're going to be wearing when they get there, right? What is it? It's a plan. It is far more of a plan than a mere open-ended call. So I hope that's clear. Likewise, the word adventure has a kind of a less than ideal quality, although I do use it all the time. It's a fun word. But if I say to you, let's go on an adventure, there's a kind of a freewheeling quality about that, right? Let's go on an adventure can sound like, let's go find something interesting. Let's go in search of stimulation. That's often what people mean by an adventure. Let's have a change of scene. Let's mix things up a bit. Now, if I take the word adventure away, because I don't think that is what a very special thing is. That doesn't sound like a very special thing. That just sounds like, boredom. This need to go on an adventure for adventure's sake. That's not the very special thing that Churchill's talking about. What I like to say instead of adventure is mission. And now we've come around to the topic of today's talk. What if instead of your hero having a call to adventure, they get a very specific invitation to a mission? So what makes a mission different than an adventure? A mission has a purpose, right? It has a goal. It has that very special quality of Churchill's very special thing. It matters. There's something about the word mission that suggests that there is a plan. There's something that must be accomplished. and that this something matters. The outcome matters. So I like to use the word mission when we talk about the second act of our stories for this very reason. A writer who gets into trouble in the second act is likely to have delivered to their hero a call to adventure. Hey, let's go do something. Or a sense of, well, I got it. Something's got to happen in this story. I'll just set my hero out on a road trip. Right. Whereas a writer with a firmer grasp of story structure has delivered to their hero an invitation to a mission. That invitation is loaded with specifics. The mission is significant. It is indeed a very special thing. And it has an outcome that matters. And the difference between this kind of vague, let's go on a road trip, we're bored feeling, and this hero is being offered the chance, I'm going to talk about that next, offered the chance to say yes to going on a mission, and the outcome matters. The outcome matters. Now, if you're writing a second act and you have a hero in that setup who's on that kind of first act foundation, you're going to have a much better time because you know what your hero is got to do, and you know that if they fail to do it, it's going to have consequences, and you know that if they succeed in doing it, it's going to have consequences. Your hero is motivated. They're not wandering seeking stimulation. They are on a mission. So it's funny how we can use different words to talk about the same things, but this is a case where my experience, both as a writer and as a teacher, suggests to me that the words that we use can lead writers astray. So that's why I'm breaking them down. Give your heroes an invitation, not a call. Send them on a mission, not an adventure. Now let's look again, if you will, at this specific wording in this passage. They're offered the chance to do this thing. Let's just deal with that phrase for a second. They're offered the chance. So it's a kind of, it's an offer, but it's not a foregone conclusion that they're going to do it. Now, there are stories in which a hero is offered the chance to do something of significance. And usually after some exploration of the difficulty of saying yes to this, they are head off on their adventure. There are other stories where it looks at first glance like the hero was not offered a chance, that they were simply swept up in some circumstance outside their control. And in stories like that, what you will find is that there is some kind of moment on the other side, right? If a tornado or a flood, or, some natural disaster falling overboard sweeps them into a second act where presumably their mission is going to fill all of those pages, but it doesn't seem like they really showed up because they have a mission. They just got swept in. What you will find, and what your job is as a storyteller, is to almost immediately, once they're in the second act, let them pick themselves up, dust themselves off, take a look around, and have them either be given or choose a mission. And I will use two examples. I said tornado and I said flood for a reason, because two of my go-to examples for story structure are The Wizard of Oz and Kipling's short story, Rikki Tikki Tavi. In The Wizard of Oz, our hero, Dorothy Gale, is taken to her second act of adventure by a tornado. It's not random. By the way, it's not a random tornado. It's exactly the tornado that she was wishing for. She's already wished to go over the rainbow. She wants very much to go home, and she's already run away from home once to try to save her dog. So Dorothy's done everything within her power to go on a mission, right? But it doesn't have a purpose because she just wants to get away. She wants to save her dog from the awful neighbor. She wants to get away from this lonely life on the farm where there are no other kids around and no one has time for her. She's done things to try to do it. And so what happens is, fortune favors the brave. The storytelling gods have said, okay, fine, we're going to help you out. A little supernatural assistance is going to be offered. And so the tornado picks her up and drops her in Oz. She is now away from home. She's in a very interesting place and the dog seems safe. But what does she want? Now she wants to go home. And this is her mission. She just wants to go home. She wants to go home. She doesn't wander around Oz saying, does anybody know the way to Kansas? If you think of what happens the minute she gets there, the plan is laid out in perfect specificity. Well, you want to go to Kansas. Nobody here knows how to do that except this one guy. He's the wizard. He lives in the Emerald City. In order to get there, you're going to follow a yellow brick road. Oh, and by the way, these are the shoes you should wear. They're red. They could come in handy sometime. That, my friends, has the specificity of a mission. Dorothy now knows exactly what she must do. And guess what? That is what she spends the entire second act doing. So the tornado was the kind of supernatural nudge that was given to a hero who was sort of already in that special moment of her life where she had to make some tough decisions and choose whether she was going to act or fail to act. She chose to act. She grabbed the dog. She got on her bike. She ran away from home. So what about Ricky, my little mongoose hero? His story begins when he's washed away by a flood. And what happens when baby Ricky, living at home in his burrow, is washed by a flood into the garden of a British military family, he's saved by them. And this is significant because later on he will be willing to sacrifice his life to save them. But they save his life. They find him basically drowned and they sort of bring him back to life. And as soon as he's active, he runs all around. He checks out the whole world and he says to himself, well, I'm going to stay and find out. He says, that's literally what he thinks to himself. I'm going to stay and find out. And so his accepting of that, it goes by in a line, but we take it for granted because it's good storytelling. But what he does not do is he doesn't say, oh, well, now that I've been washed away by a flood from my mother in the burrow, and now that I feel better, I need to find my way back to my burrow. So he sort of makes the opposite decision that Dorothy makes, right? He says, no, I'm going to stay here. I feel that my destiny is here. My special chance, the special thing that I must do is here. I've arrived. So those are examples of how the illusion of the hero who gets accidentally swept into an adventure, how it's really working on the level of symbolic meaning, how it's really working on the level of story energy. These are heroes whose moment has come. The moment in their lifetime has come, that special moment, and they've been offered the chance. And in this case, these heroes have accepted the call. Now, I really focus on this one phrase because this is something, again, in my experience, that writers struggle with a great deal, and it's so important. But here it is in Churchill's quote. So in each of us, there comes this moment that we're figuratively tapped on the shoulder and offered the chance to do a very special thing. Here it comes, unique to them and fitted to their talents. Now, this is key. When we talk about the mission, we are not playing mix and match. We don't have a list of 10 heroes on the left-hand side of the page and a list of 10 missions on the right-hand side of the page and just swap them around. If Dorothy Gale were given the mission to keep a garden safe from cobras, that does not serve her because her problem when we meet her is that she's lonely and that she's somewhat neglected. She's not getting the attention from her family that she deserves. They have been caught up in survival. They're caught up in doing the work on a farm. They've kind of forgotten about their dear Dorothy. What she needs is to have her family functioning a little better so she's not so lonely. That's what she needs. That's what she gets by the end of her story, too. Ricky is a mongoose. His destiny, as is made very clear, his nature, his very mongoose nature, is that he fights cobras. He fights snakes. They are his enemy, and he is put in the world of the mongoose to be the enemy of cobras. And this is a kind of a given in the world building of that story. And so if Ricky were to end up dropped in a Technicolor world filled with munchkins and Glinda the Good Witch and Red Shoes, that's not a good adventure for him. There's no mission for him there. I don't see any cobras in Oz. Maybe we haven't met them yet. But that's not a place where he can fulfill his destiny. It's not the thing. It's not that very special moment where he is going to get the chance to rise to the occasion. So we do not play mix and match with mission and hero. When we know our heroes well, we can design the exact mission that fulfills this, wonderfully phrased imperative. It is a very special thing. It is unique to them and fitted to their talents. Now, when writers fail to really grasp this, the trouble that they get into is that they know that the hero has to be changed somehow over the course of their story, and that this all has to matter somehow in order for the readers to care. But when they are just given a random mission that doesn't speak to the deep psyche, right? It doesn't actually dig deep into what that hero's destiny is, what their need is, what needs to be fixed, what's out of balance, what needs to be adjusted. The storytelling, it might fill page after page, and a clever writer might throw a lot of action on the page because they're trying to engage the reader, and that's sometimes what writers do to try to engage the reader. They just keep, adding drama. But the truth is, it's never going to be that engaging because the mission is not dovetailed with any precision to the transformation of consciousness that unique hero must go through. And it's a really, really important point. And it sounds kind of highfalutin. It sounds a little vague, but it's not that hard. It's really not that hard. If you've got a hero who is bad at intimacy, who is not trusting of other people, then they're going to be on a relationship journey. They're going to be on a mission in which learning to connect with others that's the transformation. And you're going to give them a mission that puts them exactly on the path of that. They're going to have to learn that thing in order for this mission to work. If you've got a hero whose destiny is to grow up to be a really fierce fighter of cobras, put him in a garden that has cobras in it, right? So it's not that hard. I think where writers struggle is even before this, if they haven't taken the time to investigate the nature of their hero sufficiently to even know. If you get the impulse, I would love to write a story about a mongoose, but you don't know anything about a mongoose and you don't bother to find out or invent something as specific as, well, here's the thing about a mongoose. A mongoose kills cobras. Oh, all right, wait a minute. So maybe that's what my story should be about, right? If you don't know enough about your hero, you're never going to think of it. You're not going to come up with it. So it all starts with knowing our hero, with doing that work, that first act work that gives us a sense of what is wrong in this hero's world? What's unfulfilled? What part of them has not been fully expressed? In what way do they need to grow? What transformation of consciousness, and that's a Joseph Campbell phrase, is in store for them? All right, we're going to go back again, because even though this quote has managed to take us through so much of excellent storytelling in just a couple of lines, there's this tremendous wisdom in the second line that bears examination. What a tragedy if that moment finds them unprepared or unqualified for that which could have been their finest hour. So the moment has come for our hero, that very special moment. They've been tapped on the shoulder and they've been offered a chance to do something that is very special. It is unique to them. It is fitted to their talents. There's a phrase I often use in the Path of the Storyteller program where I talk about the adventure of the second act, or the mission of the second act, as a bespoke suit. It is a custom tailored suit. These are not off the rack. They are designed for that hero and the hero alone. And then look at this. Look at this. What a tragedy if that moment finds them unprepared or unqualified for that which could have been their finest hour. So we're talking about the hero who either fails to accept the mission that their destiny has offered them, or refuses to rise to the occasion and fails to execute the mission, so to speak. And I just want to point out Churchill's use of the word tragedy, because although he is not giving advice to writers right now in this, he uses the word tragedy, which is a word that we also use to describe a certain kind of story. And the kind of story we call a tragedy is exactly this. These are the stories in which the hero fails for the transformation of consciousness to occur. The hero does not do what it takes for the transformation of consciousness to occur. They won't change. They instead of spending the second act on a mission, they either choose a regressive mission. They choose a mission that they define as their mission, but it's actually, it's a step in the wrong direction. And the fates keep trying to steer them away from it, and they just fail to take a hint. They refuse to change. They don't get wise. They go down with the ship. And so we have tragic heroes in literature, like, for example, King Lear, who is just refusing to acknowledge that his days as king are over, and he's, he won't see the truth of things. He's going to be a king if it kills him, even when it's just him standing alone in the rain, screaming at the sky. What is he the king of, right? But he won't let go of power, even though his time has come. The great tragic hero in The Hobbit, of course, is Thorin, who's the leader of the dwarves who have this mission to go retrieve their ancestral gold. And at the end of the tale, as we get into the third act, it's clear that Thorin is never going to realize that his need to have that ancestral gold is now the problem. All along, he thought the dragon was the problem. The gold was stolen from them. All these things were the problem. When the dragon is dead and everyone else is fighting over the gold, and tremendous harm has come to many, many, many people, there has been much bloodshed because of Thorin's quest to get that gold back. And he refuses to budge. He won't negotiate. He will not share. He won't soften his attachment. And he therefore, dies at sort of a tragic figure, with Bilbo, who's the true hero of the tale, weeping at his side. And only in the last moments of his life does Thorin look at Bilbo and say, oh, you were right and I was wrong. We should all be more like you and it would be a happier world. And that's the end of Thorin in The Hobbit. That's a tragic figure, right? That's a tragic hero. There are many tragic tales. Most stories are of the more redemptive type, but we do love our anti-heroes and our tragic stories. And look what just a neat little description this is. It's that hero who's unprepared or unqualified for the thing that could have been their finest hour. It could have gone either way. In that moment of confrontation between Thorin and Bilbo, we sort of see both possibilities, right? It is Bilbo's finest hour. It could have been Thorin's finest hour, but he couldn't change. So he's a tragic figure. Bilbo, goes on to solve things, bring peace, solve the wars. Only a little hobbit could. So these kinds of stories are tragedies, and they're tragedies for the hero who fails, but they're not just the tragedies for the hero, because one of the qualities of the mission of a true second act is that when the hero gets through it, they've sacrificed, they've grown, they are no longer the hero that started the second act. By the time the end of the second act comes, and that moment where the mission is going to be fulfilled is facing us, the hero has changed a lot, and the consequences of that second act are what are going to be explored in the third act. And in the third act, what the hero has accomplished is now going to be of benefit to others as well. So whatever that mission was, it may have felt like it was mostly for the hero's benefit all throughout the second act. But by the time we are at the end of the second act, moving into the third, the consequences are spreading to the larger world. So now it's not just about, is Bilbo going to get out of this alive? It's about, is Bilbo going to be able to stop the war of the five armies? It's not just about whether Bud in Bud Not Buddy is going to be able to find the guy that he thinks is his father and realize the truth of his own family. It's going to go beyond that, because his bravery in asking the question is going to unlock a lot of secrets in a family that is frozen in grief. And it's going to allow an entire family to be healed and come back together. So you see what I'm saying, that the hero's mission is not ultimately selfish. It broadens, particularly at the end. And so when we say it could have been their finest hour, or when Churchill says that, that's what we're talking about. It's not like that's the moment that they could have won a medal. That's the moment when what they were willing to do saved others, made an impact on others, had a larger impact. And so the true tragedy of a tragic story is not just what happens to the hero at the end, but the failure of the larger good. What that hero could have accomplished now is going not accomplished. And look at all who may suffer as a result. So I am very grateful to Mr. Churchill for this quote that has so many storytelling concepts packed into it. And as I've said, and I think I'll summarize this because I think this is what it could really serve as some very useful takeaways for the writers. Where you can easily go wrong with these concepts is the failure to make the call to adventure more of a specific invitation to something that has more of a mission, that has a plan. If you leave it an adventure, you can go wrong by having a passive hero who's just looking for stuff to do in the second act, as opposed to a hero who right from the beginning of the second act, and maybe even from the end of the first act, is on a mission, has something that they need to accomplish. And the third thing that you want to bear in mind, because it's another place where writers can go wrong, is that the mission that you give your hero is not unique and fitted to their talents. That it might be a good mission for a different kind of character with different set of problems, but it's not the exact thing that's going to bring this particular hero into a transformation of consciousness. It's a fun game to play, isn't it? Kind of like a Mad Lib of heroes and missions. Like, oh, what if we sent Ebenezer Scrooge to Oz? What if we had Dorothy Gale wake up on Christmas Eve with ghosts, trying to take her on a journey through her past. You see, it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. We actually need to have a bespoke suit of mission for our hero in order to be able to get through that second act. So I want to make one last point, and I've got the comment box open. And so if anybody has questions about this notion of the mission of the second act and how it works best for our heroes, go ahead and start popping them in, because it usually takes a half of a minute or so for them to come into my feed. The last point I want to make is that as we're playing around with this World War II quote from Winston Churchill, I think it had to do with the Battle of Britain. When we talk about heroes and the hero's journey, work and story structure, one of the pitfalls that writers can be prey to is this idea of the hero as someone who has like some kind of fight, that it's somebody who's brave and is going to, go have a kind of a military sort of experience. And that those are the types of stories that tend to follow the hero's journey, but that it doesn't apply to other types of stories. I just hear this a lot. I don't agree with it at all. I want to tell you why. It's a very superficial reading. But because we're talking about Winston Churchill and we're talking about his exhortation, to people during wartime to, say yes to the mission that's coming their way, because the whole world was depending on them to do so. It has that quality about it. It might trigger some of that thinking in somebody watching this. And so I just want to say there's no question, of course, that there are historical opportunities for heroes to rise. And military service and military bravery are no, that's no small example of the kind of heroism that people are capable of. I'm recording this at the end of September in 2021, and I was recently chatting with friends, many of us who were living in New York during 9/11, and we were trading some of the stories of the unsung heroes of the day, people whose names we don't even know, people that you've never heard of, but the stories that we heard of the amazing things that people were capable of on that day. And so it doesn't take a superhero. It doesn't take a war to bring out the best in people. It doesn't take anything other than life to bring us to that special moment that Churchill talks about. It to each of us, these moments come. And that's what he says. To each of us, there comes these special moments. You may feel that resonates in your own life, that there may have been multiple times that a special moment came and you had to really think, am I ready for this? It seems like this is what I'm being asked to do. It sounds really hard. Am I going to be able to do it? Life has that quality. We chug along for a while and then these special moments come. When we're designing a story as writers, we're going to create a work of fiction, we are designing that story around one of these special moments. In our hero's life, that special moment has come, right? They have been, they've been given the chance, right? They have been figuratively tapped on the shoulder and they're offered the chance to do that special thing. It is unique to them. It is fitted to their talents. And if they fail to do it, if they are weak and fearful and just say, no. I know that I'm a big miser. I'm a bad guy, but no, thank you. Ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. I'd like to stay Ebenezer Scrooge just the way I am. End of story. That's tragic. It's not only tragic because it means that Ebenezer Scrooge just lives out of his miserable life being cruel to people, but it also means that Tiny Tim does not survive. You see, that his failure, what could have been his finest hour, is a failure that impacts others. That is the alternate ending, that the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come shows Ebenezer Scrooge literally, this is what the world is going to be like if you don't get it together, if you don't have your transformation of consciousness. It's the best example I can think of that, sort of perfection in clarity in storytelling. It's right there for you to look at. Often in the stories that we love best, it is these, non-military, vulnerable, unlikely heroes that we find most memorable, whether it's a character like Bud in Bud Not Buddy, or Jane in Jane Eyre, who's lacking all advantages and is having hard times when we meet her as a very disadvantaged child, or even a character like Bilbo, who is the smallest, he's not a fighter. He's not a fighter, He's not a soldier when we meet him. He's a guy who just would like to stay home. Thank you very much. But he is figuratively tapped on the shoulder, and indeed his special moment has come. So don't get hung up, please, in thinking that hero means any particular kind of central figure or any particular kind of milieu or genre of story. It has nothing to do with that. It really has to do with this very human experience of what life is like, that to each of us, these moments come. We're given the chance. We have to decide what to do. And what we decide matters, not just to us, but to others. That's story structure. There it was in one paragraph. So I've been inspired by Winston Churchill today. I hope you found some inspiration too. I don't see any particular questions in the comments, but I do hope that this was of interest to you and of benefit to you. Second acts are certainly the tricky part of storytelling. And as you see, so much of having a successful second act is decided way back at the beginning. You can't get halfway through a second act and say, oh, I wonder what mission my hero is on, and I wonder why it matters. Whoops. You kind of need to know that back in the first act. All right. So thank you all so much for being here. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, I would be so grateful if you subscribe. It helps get the word out about the channel so that other writers can come and get a little mentorship energy, which is my great pleasure and privilege to offer you. I look forward to seeing you again next week. And as always, I'm always interested in what questions you have, what topics you would like me to talk about in the future. All right, so don't be shy. You can leave them in the comments below the video, and I will read every single one. Until I see you again, happy writing, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.